We're going to do a little bit of an instruction video here on the Harvestrite XL. This is a one of the what they call the classic. So this is the first version they came out with before they went all stainless. So I'm going to do just some basic instructions for using candy mode and tray warm for folks who don't know. So on this one, we're going to use customize, and this is going to be for typical candy and whatnot. So on this one, I just run it at 20 because candy doesn't need to freeze. Extra dry time. In candy mode, whatever you set this for is what it's going to run. There's no regular dry time and then extra dry time. If you set this to 0, it's going to go through the cool down phase and switch right off. So we're going to go 4 hours. For candy in high temp candy mode, I pretty much run almost everything at 150 degrees. Now, we're going to go ahead and start it. Kicks on. I've got those in there because I was looking at how much space there was if you double stack. Not really much room in there. And this is on the 6-tray classic. So, the machine's going to go through a 15-minute cool down phase. At the end of the cool down phase, I'll come back. While I'm waiting for this machine to cool down, I'm just going to go ahead and we're going to do a little setup on the machine. Here's some, I'm going to point out some common areas that I check for vacuum leaks and stuff like that. So, be right back. On these vacuum hoses that come from Harvestrite, they've got a black O-ring inside there. That, what I like to do is take just a little bit of the oil from the vacuum pump, and I use that to just lubricate that little black O-ring in there so that when I tighten it down on here, it's just gonna slide. So I'm gonna hook that up and come back. Now here on this, I've tightened that as much as I can by hand, but this part here is crooked. If you watch, you can see it shifted around a little bit. Now, this is no longer tight because that shifted. So when you put this together, you got to make sure, 100% sure, that this is sitting squarely on there. Same thing on this one back here. You got to make sure when you connect this to here that it's perfectly straight. I'll demonstrate again. There's no wiggle because that's seated on there nice and straight. That should not leak at all. So we'll come back after and we'll do a vacuum test to make sure everything's sitting proper. Got plenty of oil in there, so we'll come back to it. Sometimes if you're having a hard time getting your vacuum to seal, or the vacuum, and you don't think it's sealing, make sure that your cord is not sitting behind this part of the rack, and that it's tucked up in this area here, so when this is against the back of the drum, this isn't blocking it and causing it to stick out further. And you'll know it's all the way in there proper because there will be a gap between the rack and the door seal on both sides. If the rack is pushed forward and touching the door seal, the machine might not seal properly. So you should have between 1/8 to almost 1/4 of an inch on either side of that rack. So this one's going to defrost, and we're going to make an instruction video for this one and the commercial one. All right, now the chamber is cool, so we're going to switch it over to high temperature candy process. And it's all cool. I took the trays out there. So if we want to do something like lemon heads or something that needs to get transferred from the oven over into the machine, what I do here is I hit continue. I start tray warm. I put it on, I don't know, 20, 25 minutes, maybe even half an hour. Now, that temperature is going to go up until it reaches 150. When it reaches 150, then the timer will start going down. This timer doesn't do anything until that temperature reaches 150. So we'll come back when that temperature reaches 150 or sometime around there. But right now, it's going to continue to rise until it hits 150. If I'm doing lemon heads or something, I put the lemon head or the empty freeze dryer trays in here, so the freeze dryer trays empty get warmed up to 150. So when I transfer from the oven into the trays are already hot and I can put them back on a hot rack. And if this time, set this time high enough so that if each tray takes you a couple of minutes to transfer stuff into, you've got enough time on the timer before it switches into vacuum mode. When that timer hits 0, it's going to switch over into vacuum mode. So we want to have enough time on here to get everything transferred across, and then we can come up and we can just turn the time down using the down arrow, and that'll set that to 0, and the vacuum kicks on right away. But the stuff that we put in first, let's say we start top to bottom, the top shelf is going to sit there and linger at 150, whereas the bottom shelf is going to be, fresh out of the oven. So these will have been sitting here for, 2 minutes, 4 minutes, 6 minutes, 8 minutes, 10 minutes, and the 12th minute will be here, and we should have somewhere around 8 minutes left on there. We'll screw that down to 0, and the whole thing will kick off. Top shelf and bottom shelf are typically cooler, so this one may or may not do great, but if this is the hottest one fresh out of the oven, when we bring this down to 0, in theory, they should all puff nicely. We'll come back in a few minutes. So, as we can see, temperature's going up, time is passing, but it's not counting down yet. So, this timer will not start until that temperature reaches 150 degrees. So, because we're going to be simulating doing the candy, I'm going to go ahead and close the drain valve, make sure it's perpendicular. Put my hose in the bucket for later. Look at that, 150, timer started while we were around the corner. So, as we can see, listen carefully, only the condenser's going, no vacuum pump. I'm gonna zero this out. So we're gonna simulate and pretend that I've already transferred all of the candy in here. So we're just gonna zero that out. Goes into drying mode. Vacuum pump just kicked on. A little bit of rattle until it smooths out. Once all the oil starts circulating, it'll smooth out a little bit. So we're gonna look and see how long it takes to get that down to 500 or below. So we'll come back when we get close. So it took just over 5 minutes to start dropping below 2500. So we'll keep an eye on this. We'll come back in a minute. For comparison, this is my second Harvest Right XL. So sitting at ambient, it's at 32,000, 33,000 mTOR. So to go from 33,000 to under 2,500 took just a little over 5. So I was going to take a picture at the 10-minute mark, so we're approaching that, and we're just about to 500 MT right there at 10 minutes. So we're well on track to be under 500 MT in under 15 minutes, which is good performance, especially for these larger machines, these XLs. It's usually a little bit faster with the mediums and larges. So once this hits 500, I'll switch over. We'll do a vacuum test on the large to see how that thing does. We'll actually do that one separately because it's defrosting. So there we go. That's my mark. That's my threshold. So we can see that the temperature fluctuates a little bit, and then the drying once that zeroes out, it's over. There's no regular dry time in the candy mode. So I must have set this thing for 4 hours and 30 instead of 4 like I meant to. So anyway, there we go.